Just testing audio. Can everyone hear? Barbara, can you hear us? Just trying to test audio.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
So that's really great.
Thanks for the help too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Definitely need more people to form.
Recording in progress.
Bianca and that's is your computer muted?
I muted it. Muting.
Testing. Hey, look at that. Okay. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that is quorum. And we can let people trickle in. Should we close the door? Yeah, thank you, Secretary. Okay, welcome everyone to our November meeting of the Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Committee. It looks like most folks are online, which is great. Thank you for being here. I know it's very cold outside, so don't blame anybody. Thank you to Brenda for taking minutes tonight as our acting secretary and also just our regular secretary. Start with a roll call, and then I don't see any, well, I mean, we have Eric Weisman is our guest, and I will let him introduce himself after roll call. But let's get started with tech members. When I call your name, just say if you're here. Ted Alexander. See Ted. Ginny Alverson. Caroline Bodiger. Caroline, Meredith Brown. I don't think I've seen Meredith. Laura Evans.
Here.
Christopher Ferry.
Here.
Tim Gilman, who I don't think I see. Preston Vitellius. Satoko Harai. Here. Brenda Marvin. I know Brenda is here. Steve Mulder. Barbara Myers.
Yes, here.
Bianca Norkunis.
Yeah.
Dieter Pamplona.
Here.
Zach Rosenberg.
Here.
Alessandra Snyder, I'm here. Rob Stanzel. Don't see Rob. And Carol Bugaris, who I don't see. Our ex officio members, City Councilor Willem Baugh, who is not here. Kate White.
Yeah.
And Justin Schreiber.
Here.
Awesome. And then Eric, as I think our only guest for tonight, I know you'll be taking the floor in a little bit, but do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Eric Wiseman, City of Somerville Department of Public Works Director of Operations. I've been with the city since 2017 and been with DPW since 2019.
Awesome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good to see you all again.
And then I also see which you don't have to be a panelist, but, I just want to let people know that we should kind of start with the, mobility division, which is very exciting to have another member on our team. And I do see Brad. Okay, moving on to our, October minutes. Does anybody have concerns or comments on our October minutes? Seeing none, I vote to approve our minutes from October. Do I have a second?
This is people that second the motion.
All in favor for approving the October minutes, please say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Subcommittee updates. I can start from the community events subcommittee. We had a lot going on in October. We tabled at Monster Mash Summer Streets with our friends at Mobility, as well as some folks from the Somerville Bike Committee. We made buttons. We had people post their favorite place to walk, as per usual. We had a lot of good conversations and saw a lot of very good costumes. We also held our community walk on Western Pearl Street. The next day, we had like 10, 15 people in attendance, I want to say, including PTAC members, mobility staff, and some neighborhood residents. And we'll summarize the findings of our walk when we get to that agenda item. And then finally, we held our second subcommittee meeting, I guess last Wednesday, which we did as a walk in Union Square. That we held kind of in preparation for a walk audit that we want to do next spring. And we want to focus on a few key crossings that feel dangerous for people walking, or otherwise not suiting their needs as we assessed it. So I think we got some really good data from that walk, and that'll help shape our approach for more official walk audit next spring. And then kind of as a follow-up to our walk, at our next subcommittee meeting, we're gonna plan to review the Union Square streetscape plan and see what improvements are planned for those areas that we noticed as concerns. And then if there are any sort of low-cost short-term improvements that we want to advocate for. Moving on to, well, any questions, any additional comments from any members of the community events subcommittee? Great. Design review.
Yes, we did meet after a reschedule because I happened to schedule exactly at Halloween night, which is not a good idea. That's what you get when you got a childless Brazilian in charge. But Alok and I met, we discussed both Western Pearl and West Broadway plans. And I think we're gonna be discussing more tonight, so I'm not gonna talk a lot right now. But I think we're very happy with where we are going in both directions, both plans.
So thank you, Vitor. And then special projects with Rob, which I know that that's on hold for now. So no pressure to give an update, Rob. Okay. So our first kind of meaty agenda item is our annual update on snow clearing with Eric from DPW. So Eric, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Everybody, thank you for having me. In case you missed it, Eric Wiseman, City of Somerville, DPW Operations Director. If you don't mind, I'm gonna, it looks like the slides are shared, so if we could just advance to the next slide, please. Okay. So I'm gonna take you through just an overview of our snow operations, the plan for this year, and just some changes for this year, including an update on the sort of enhanced removal corridors. Do you want me to share my screen? I don't see the slides anymore. So if you could advance to the first, or the next slide from here. Slide 3. Okay. Oop, back one more. Thanks. Okay, so I just want to take you through a typical storm timeline. Of course, there are no typical storms. They're always different. We're always playing a guessing game of when snow will start, how much we'll get, sort of when the key impacts will be and when we'll wrap up. But this is sort of your typical platonic ideal of a winter storm for us. So before the storm, our staff and contractors pre-treat roads and select sidewalks, including those adjacent to city and school buildings. And then SD communicates pre-storm button-up procedures to residents. And then during the storm, our staff and contractors repeatedly plow routes. So we have a number of routes throughout the city that include streets and the community path and bike paths, or sort of separated bike infrastructure, as well as city buildings and properties such as schools, playgrounds, parks. Okay. And then 6 daylight hours post-storm, ISD inspectors canvass key areas, which I think we'll get into later. They issue tickets, and then we remove snow from properties in violation of the key sidewalk corridor, which we've talked about in the past. That's Broadway and School Street. And then in the 12 to 48 hours after the storm, there's additional enforcement, clearing, and removal, and that includes bus stops, parking lots, school pickup areas as necessary. And then as we get additional 311 requests about issues with snow, we'll be responding to those. Next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight some changes this year. We've added capacity to our brine program. I talked about this last year, but we've developed a brining program. So I think last year we were just starting to roll it out. We've built a permanent brine system at the DPW Yard 2. And we're incorporating the addition and application of beet juice as part of our brining program. This will limit the amount of salt, which is a pretty caustic substance. So we are always looking for ways to reduce salt on the ground, but still maintaining, de-icing, good de-icing. And this will be particularly useful for pre-treatment during storms. Okay. With mobility, we've added, or the city has added additional protected bicycle facilities, Western Washington Street, Central Street, and Summer Street, and Walnut Street, excuse me, and then other new infrastructure for the city includes speed humps in a number of locations, and a bunch of new curb extensions, raised crosswalks, floating bus stops, bump outs, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're constantly meeting with mobility on these efforts, and not this weekend, but the following weekend, we have a snow drill exercise where we bring the drivers in so that they're familiar with these additional infrastructure elements before the storms. We include all our contractors, so they get a low stakes, no snow opportunity to drive the city, see changes, and think about how changes to the streetscape will affect their plowing operations. Next slide, please. Okay, quick update on the community path. I'm sure many of you use the community path all the time, as I do. I just want to hammer the fact that maintenance, especially snow removal, will be extremely difficult due to the narrow design of the path. We're going to be handling handling snow, fighting internally with the grounds and the highway department with contractor support. Last year, we ran a couple of our own pieces of equipment back and forth and a couple of contractor pieces of equipment. And that worked out pretty well, although we didn't have a truly significant storm last year. So in the case of significant snow, parts of community path may not be maintained during the storm. And parts of the community path may have to be closed as snow clearing operations are underway. Again, we've yet to experience a significant winter storm while the community path is in place. So it's still a learning process. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's often questions about snow removal and when the Department of Public Works does snow removal. And there are sort of three general thresholds. When we have something that is 6 inches or more, so more than your typical small storm, depending on weather conditions immediately after, the commissioner will issue an order to conduct snow removal around schools, clear bus stops, etc. As you hit the 12-inch amount, bus stops, school grounds, and city buildings, snow removal becomes really sort of mandatory. And then beyond 24 inches, we start to consider expanding to main and side streets to due to sort of mobility and public safety considerations. Once you have that much snow and vehicles, return to park, you really start to have narrowing streets, and we work with public safety to determine when that becomes an issue and make a call for that. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to put on my best inspectional services hat here and say that ISD has priorities for city sidewalk enforcement. Their highest priorities are around elder care and assisted living. And then they do enforcement immediately adjacent to daycares and schools, followed by our key sidewalk snow removal area. So that is Broadway and School Street, and then shift on to constituent and staff complaints, usually in the form of 311s. And then tickets are issued to property owners via door hangers and mail. So yeah, these priorities are for issuing tickets to property owners if I'm not clear enough for not abiding by the ordinance to remove snow from their sidewalks. Sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, and then this is my finger pointing slide. So whose responsibility is snow removal? Our responsibility as a city is city streets, sidewalks around city property. So that's schools, city buildings, school lots, parks, playgrounds, removal from squares and islands, bridges, and bus stops and ramps adjacent to bus stops. And a lot of that removal is done by contractors. It's a huge operation just to do the bus stops and adjacent ramps. I think we mobilized something like 60 pieces of equipment across 5 vendors or something like that. And then the state is responsible for state roads, so McGrath Highway, 93, Alewife Brook Parkway. I'm blanking on some, but you get the idea. And then around and adjacent to MBTA stations. The MBTA is responsible for a small handful of bus stops in the city, none of which are in Somerville. And then by ordinance, property owners are responsible for snow removal from the sidewalks and curb ramps adjacent to their properties. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to have an update on FY 24 for the the sidewalk snow removal. Again, Broadway and School Street, communications and mobility conducted outreach ahead of first storm, and as sort of outlined here, the plan process is after the storm, 6 hours of daylight. ISD conducts enforcement and issues citations. Then they provide us with a list of violations, and then DPW clears sidewalks of properties in violation. And the idea here is that it's a way to work with an already mobilized enforcement agency and then just sort of fill in the gaps where properties weren't weren't doing their removal. And unlike in FY 23, we actually did have a 6-inch storm, although it was a weird storm where it sort of depended which part of the city you were in. But we hit that 6-inch threshold. We did the pilot or the 4-inch threshold. We did the pilot, and we issued, or ISD issued citations to 23 properties, and we did removal from those properties, I think that same day. And that was, yeah, January 9th, 2024. Next slide, please. Okay, and then I wanted to update you on our Vision Zero crew. We finally have a fully staffed Vision Zero crew. I think last year we had workers, but no foreman. We have a foreman now. ISD is going to continue to work with Somerstat on data collection. I hesitate to say hopefully, because I always hope for no snow, or, certainly less than 4 inches at any given time. And then, we continue to try to be better communicators, communicating the status of sidewalk removals, bus stop removal operations, where we're at with the bike lanes and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. Thank you. I'm happy to stick around for questions and comments. Sorry, I don't know if I should call on people or,
Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Alessandra, I don't think your audio is coming through.
Yeah.
Christopher, go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear us? Okay. Yeah, my question was about the community path. You were saying that it might be closed in cases of a snow. How would that be indicated? What method does the city have to inform people and mark that?
So we would work with communications first of all to announce that, and then we would put horses out that the path was closed. I think if we have to do serious snow operations, we're going to have to close sections of the path. So you might see that. We certainly don't want people getting onto the path and have heavy equipment there. So you'll see horses or trucks at either end of the path, sort of like depending on what works operationally for both the section and the pieces of equipment that we have mobilized. But the current plan is you'd see like blue police horses at either section. And like it's especially important, I think, because during snow operations, we often remove the bollards to sort of for ease of the equipment we put on the paths. So yeah, we want to be really careful that, people don't try to get in there.
And I assume those decisions in clearing would be being coordinated with Cambridge as well. For the long run from East Somerville all the way to Leechmere.
It's interesting. It's a great question. We somehow got a bad deal where we're responsible for even that little Cambridge stretch. Yeah, I think we would let Cambridge know, but I don't think they're going to put up much of a stink about us clearing snow from their part of the path.
Yeah, I just hate to close it on one end and have people not have it.
Oh yeah.
Be coming in from the Cambridge side and not have that be closed.
Hopefully no cars are on that part. while we're doing that either.
Laura?
Yeah, this might be a better question better for ISD, but you're here, so
Yeah.
do you
Lay it
know
on me.
how many the citations are issued for the stretches that aren't sort of the priority clearance area? Because I feel every year like I file a bunch of tickets and then they get closed in like May with no action.
I don't know that. I think it's pretty easy for them to report on that. All their tickets are issued through the Citizen Serve platform, and so yeah, that's something that certainly I could ask about and have mobility report back to you guys on that.
Yeah, I would find that interesting. I think a lot of us would. And then my other piece, which is a comment, and I know this is not maybe a decision made at your level, it's maybe a higher level decision, but I feel like I have to say this every year, that it is frustrating to me that we can manage to clear streets during a storm, but that pedestrians end up waiting 6 daylight hours. And then the winter is not much daylight, so that's like sometimes like the next day. That is frustrating, and it seems like it is driven to make sure we can get that fine revenue rather than sort of focusing on how we can make sidewalks accessible for people. So always disappointing to learn that that is happening in this pilot.
I understand. I understand the feedback 100%. I think it is important to have, like, aside from the revenue, I think that we have like a mobilized workforce that's available to clear the sidewalks in front of properties. And I think, like, unfortunately, enforcement is the best tool at this point to compel people to do it. I don't know if it's possible to close that window for 6 hours or something like that. Or if the expectation could be, I would love if property owners' expectations were the same expectations they have of us, that streets are cleared as soon as the snow stops falling. So I will agree with you on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you anyway.
Hear me if I'm over here? Testing, a little bit?
It's better.
Yes.
You're still a
Lost
little
you
quiet.
again.
Yeah, now we can't hear you.
Sorry, guys. No, you don't have to move over here. I'll just sit next to you. How about here?
That sounds good.
Lordy. Okay. I see a guest has their hand raised. I think it's pronounced Eilish is the name. I'm gonna click this button to allow you to talk, and you should see a button to unmute yourself now.
Hello, my name is Eilish. I live in Union Square.
Eilish.
I apologize because I came late, and this may have been abundantly clear to absolutely everyone from the beginning of the meeting. The people who are doing this removal, are they DPW or are they contracted?
Specifically for the sidewalks? Or
For
just in
this
general?
question, yes.
Yeah, so the sidewalk areas have been, when we're talking about Broadway and School Street, I think initially we were thinking that would be a contractor thing. But from the very first season, we have tried to do it in-house to let us sort of respond as quickly as possible. And it's worked out really well. So our plan is to continue to do that in-house with with our own equipment and staff.
Okay, and sorry, the follow-up is how many people are in that staff trying to do this work?
So the first year, I think we had a team of, like, I want to say between 4 and 6 staff. They had small equipment, and those were bigger storms. I think this was 22. Year there was nothing. This time we had a single person with a piece of equipment. So he just took the list and shot down the roads and sort of just like responded in a row. And I think he did it in an evening. So he was he started at the end of the workday and was finished by midnight. And I think he had like some sort of a mechanical malfunction over the course of it. So that one storm, we did it with one person over, I think, 8 hours.
So it sounds like then anyone who is concerned that this isn't getting done fast enough, the answer really is, so we need to, increase taxes so that we can hire more people to do this work, because that it sounds like if you have one person, this is quite a lot of work for one person to do, particularly when we have, as we do sometimes, very heavy snows.
Yeah, I think if that was a storm where I think there was like between 4 and 6 inches in the storm, so it was sort of appropriate to have somebody just driving along with a small piece of equipment. I think if it was a heavier storm, we would mobilize more staff. Yeah.
Okay. Is this part of the work? I know that there, and again, please forgive my ignorance. I understand that sometimes the city hires like students under 18 to do some snow shoveling and such. Would that ever be part of this? Like, would this program ever be part of this, or is it only used for other areas?
So I'm not an expert in the city's youth shoveling program, but the way I believe that program works is particular residents are matched with particular students, and they shovel one or more property, or properties for residents in need of shoveling support like every storm. So I think it's like, rather than
It's
focusing
not city
on,
land at all.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Sorry, I interrupted you. It's not city property at all then.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, it's property that residents are responsible for clearing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you for
Yep.
answering my question.
Sure.
Eric, I was just gonna clarify, like you were talking about, there was 6-person team and 1-person team. So these are folks that would be doing other snow clearing responsibilities, if not.
Yes, right, yeah. It's typically the teams that operate smaller equipment. So like in both storms, they were buildings and ground staff who typically operate what we call or what are called, trackless. We call it a trackless, and it's like a small like tractor with a plow in the front and a small sander in the back. And where this is useful is it allows them to both clear the snow and apply de-icer. So this is equipment and staff that would be typically responding to 311s, doing additional clearing around school buildings, city buildings, parks, playgrounds, things like that.
Eric, this is Victor. You glossed over some of the work on bus stops. Can you clarify what's the priority for bus stops, and how do you think about, like, when do you schedule them in your schedule them?
Sure. So if I could just, like, you were a little hard to hear. If I could restate your question, as I think I understood it. How do we think about prioritizing bus stops? How do we prioritize bus stops in terms of snow removal? Okay. So we have 4 lists of all the bus stops in the city, 4 or 5 lists. I think there were 2 different ways we break it down depending on sort of the size of the storm. And they're divided geographically, and they're issued to contractors and or city staff that go through the lists. And when we try to do all the lists at the same time in a given storm. So we're not like saying, we don't really have a priority in the sense that bus stop 1, then bus stop 16, then bus stop 4. We sort of hand a list, the instructions to the contractors or the laborers doing the removal is clear all these bus stops, and our sort of, depending on the size of the storm, we try to do it in 1 to 2 days immediately after the storm. So we're not saying at this point, we're not saying like, oh, these are our key bus stops. These bus stops have the the highest utilization or anything like that. But as I'm saying this, it sounds like a great idea.
I can't hear you at
Yeah,
all,
you're not coming through at all.
Alessandra.
Yeah, sorry.
Alessandra's asking why is the MBTA only responsible for certain bus stops? And I might be able to answer that potentially. I think they're not responsible for any bus stops. They have chosen key routes where they will do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a strange thing. I think next week is like the MBTA snow kickoff meeting. And they'll go over that, like, I guess they're kind of like the city in that they say like, this is our expectations for cities for how to remove bus stops, but it's really left to cities and towns to do. And I don't know how that came to be, but
And I think even for the city, it's not something that's legally required. It's something that Somerville just does when it's
yeah. Yeah, I got the sense like when I started, the sort of conventional wisdom was MBTA was responsible for this and they just didn't, particularly around bus shelters. I don't know if that was ever true, but we certainly see it as our responsibility.
Yes, the contract to be clear. And I think all the shelters, but that doesn't mean they're clearing the bus stop entirely.
Yep.
Okay, can you hear me? Testing? No. Absolutely
Yes. Now, no. I'm sorry.
Eilish, can you
All right. Sorry, were you asking me a question?
raise your hand again? Do you have
Oh,
another question?
yes, I did. Sorry, I thought you were asking me an informational question. I was like, really? So I swear that this is related in my head, though I understand if none of you have the answer to this question. I know that there is a ongoing effort to redesign the bus routes for the MBTA. It's been like 10 years or something like this. Do we have any idea when the next set of buses that might be running through Somerville might change? And I am asking because of the snow removal question. Like what was it, T96 or something was supposed to be some massive something, and there would be more, what do we call them? The structures, I forget what the word.
Shelters? Yeah.
Do we know if that's happening anytime soon?
I'll keep it brief just because we're all off topic. They are doing phase 1 this next month in December. It's mainly about routes in Everett and Chelsea. The change for Somerville is the 86 is becoming the 109. Thank you. And it's still the 86, but it won't go all the way to Alston. It's going to stop at Harvard. And on the other end, it's going to go past Sullivan all the way. 15 minutes or better, 5 a.m. to 1 a.m.
Okay, so this doesn't change the number of shelters there that we would be responsible for dealing with the snow for.
No, we are working to add shelters along the route as much as. And if you just Google bus network redesign phase 1, you can get all the details. Oh, thanks. Any other questions for Eric?
Can you thank Eric very profusely?
Right now I can hear you. I heard the thank you.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, if there's any questions that anybody in this group has, please reach out to me. I think I'll put my email address in the chat. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
you. Yeah.
Testing. Yeah, okay.
Edit.
Can you say something, Satoku?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you-
What a throwback.
I think if everyone online could try to stay muted when they're not speaking, that would also help. Just to have one.
It's getting worse and worse.
Oh, no.
Maybe someone needs to stand next to the owl.
Or we switch to our computers.
I honestly think it's the internet.
You know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unplug it and plug it back in, and we're gonna see if that helps.
Do some power cycling.
See, so I feel like through like IT.
Stand by.
Normally this one has been really good, so.
Yeah, it's been good.
Okay. Oh, they're. Interesting.
Camera is going wild.
What's interesting is it's kind of loose. That's what I was trying to push back in. All right. Then I unplug, I just have to reset the audio.
Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Alright. We'll give it a shot.
Okay.
What is that? It's blinking.
Yeah. Yeah, some tech stuff in the room is not doing
Yeah.
this.
Oh, I think I should zoom.
Okay, got it, yeah.
Okay, give us a holler if we start cutting out again, and maybe we'll just switch to one of our computers. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. We are gonna talk about two ongoing street reconstruction projects. The first we're gonna talk about is Western Pearl Street, which we've been discussing a lot lately and walking on. And then we'll talk about West Broadway, which is a lot further along in the design process. But for Western Pearl Street, I'm gonna kick it over to Justin, who's gonna give us a really brief overview of the three design possibilities for Western Pearl.
Thanks. So I know everyone studied the meeting slides, so I'm just gonna review the design options we presented. So this is lacking in context, but if there are questions, I can provide that context. So just jumping right into the different designs. Option one, install protected bike lanes in both directions, maintain vehicle traffic in both directions, and remove all on-street parking. This is what it takes to keep two-way bikes and two-way cars on the street. We do not have room for any vehicle parking. It would meet the bike network plan vision. It provides biking options in both directions, and it keeps open flexibility for the Medford Street Bridge closure, which if folks remember, this was an idea that came out of the Gilman Square streetscape to sort of connect Medford to Pearl and close the bridge, except for emergency vehicles, bikes, peds. Gives us space to do an accessible path up to the Green Line station. There is no accessible path to the Green Line station today. However, it means no curbside parking or loading. It also means we can't modify the cross section really at all. So no bump outs. Everything would be straight. You know, there's no changing or shifting, that sort of thing. No curb extensions. We also could not do floating bus stops, so the bike lanes would not be protected at, the 3 bus stops on each side for about 100 feet or so. And then we have option 2. So this is an option which would convert Pearl Street to a one-way for vehicles, install protected bike lanes in both directions, and then maintain that parking or sort of flexible lane. This also meets the bike network plan vision. And because we've turned the street one way, we've got a little more space to work with. And it's the parking lane, but we're calling it a flex zone because it's more than just the parking lane. It's where we would put any bump outs. It's where the space we would use for floating bus stops. If we need to do a curb extension around a tree, do a planting zone, it's the flexible space, shift the parking from one side to another for a chicane. The drawback for this option is we could not close the Medford Street Bridge. If we have one direction of vehicle traffic on Pearl, we will need Medford Street to be the pair that goes the other direction. It also would require a lot of traffic analysis to figure out what other traffic signals in the area we need to change, how bad would the queues be. You can imagine we would be taking the peak hour traffic from Medford Street and adding it to Pearl in one peak, and then in the other peak hour, we'd be taking traffic that's on Pearl today and adding it to Medford Street. Both streets are relatively congested during peak, so definitely some congestion would be part of this plan. And then lastly, we have option 3, install a protected bike lane in one direction and install a quick build protected bike lane in the opposite direction. Or maintain some other alternative route for bikes in the opposite direction. So this is the 2-way for cars, 1-way for bikes option. It does preserve flexibility for Medford Street Bridge closure. It includes the flex space. Of course, the big downside is there's a bike lane in only one direction. And in the other direction, we would have to find an alternative bike route. We've suggested Medford Street. There could be other options for alternative bike routes. We want to limit it to at most 5 minutes. So all on one page, you've got the 3 options. Option 1, 2-way bikes, 2-way vehicles, no parking. Option 2, 2-way bikes, 1-way vehicles, yes parking. And option 3, the reverse of that, 1-way for bikes, 2-way for vehicles, and still having a parking zone. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it on the slide for your discussion.
Awesome, thank you, Justin. I did want to add one additional thing that came up at our last meeting where we discussed Western Pearl Street, which is that the 80 bus right now runs on Western Pearl Street, but at some point in the bus network redesign, it is set to not run on Western Pearl Street anymore. The MBTA has asked the city to design the street as though there is a bus stop, or as though there is going to be a bus running on it for the foreseeable future. But there are at least plans for that to not happen at some point. I would really love Vitor and other folks from the design review committee to just give their thoughts on this plan.
So we did discuss this design at length. It's a very hard decision because none of the options are actually super nice. Ideally, we want to keep parking dual lanes and dual bike lanes, of course. But within the options, I think we were preferring the one with one-way lane for cars. And that option is, we got there by simply looking at the street and our experience walking over there. We know that there's a lot of speeding. We know that there's a lot of the fact that the street is coming straight out of Medford, McGrath is a problem. The cars will just speed. If we don't put anything there, they will just do what they do. So having a one-way lane that goes from West Somerville to McGrath in that direction specifically fixes that problem, because all of the speeding we saw was coming into Medford Street. So that seems to be the best option. at least for us. It does allow us to keep some options for bus stops. It does allow us to implement speed controlling options there by moving the traffic left and right, as you have seen in other streets. And it does allow us to keep some of the drop off and pick up locations that, you know, the business over there mentioned on the city's feedback survey thing. So it seems to be that that's the best option. But again, it's really hard because most of that option does require us to choose to not close Medford Street later on. And because that's going to be a one-way off as well, one-way lane for cars. And that is probably acceptable, but I really like to get the full committee's feedback on that, because it seems to be a major decision that, you know, needs to be well thought.
Yeah, thank you, Vitor. Anybody else from design review want to chime in here?
Quick things. We did notice that we need to think about this project in connection with the new McGrath design for the future. So if that design gets significant improvements in bike lane facilities, this street will be used to connect back to the community path and so on, which is not what is, so the way this would work is bikers will choose to go from McGrath right into the city, say to Davis Square in that street. And if they want to go to East Somerville, they will need to cross McGrath to the other side, and they can pick the community path from that side as well. So there is a vision that if you're coming from McGrath as a biker, you might not need a two-way lane for bikes. But in either case, I think our biking network plan is not accounting for the new changes on McGrath yet. That's to keep in mind, because, for instance, I believe Pearl Street on the other side of McGrath is just a neighborway, not really any specific protected bike lane design. And that will, I think people will struggle to find routes into that part of the city, which also implies that we need to think about how to connect, say, Central Somerville and East Somerville through Pearl in a nice way as well, both for bikes and for cars.
Okay, thank you for that. The last kind of programmatic comment that I would love to get in is just anybody who's on our community walk. I know, Barbara, you helped to take notes, but I certainly don't want to put you on the spot. But I'm happy to summarize the findings of our walk, but would anybody like to contribute from our walk? I'm going to summarize just a little bit then. So we, let's see. We were really interested in the possibility for adding more crosswalks across Pearl Street. There was one at Wigglesworth and one at James Street that we identified as possibly being useful. And we thought it would be really lovely to have raised crossings there, which would hopefully help mitigate some of the traffic that Vitor was talking about a little bit earlier. We also looked at the Walnut Street intersection, which is currently fully signalized. And we talked about the potential to convert that to an all-way stop sign, which it sounded like a lot of attendees were in favor of. Because doing that would prevent people walking from having to wait very long to cross, and it would provide a clearer stopping point for people driving, rather than having them see a green light and speed through the intersection. They would just always have to stop at the stop sign. We were also interested in having the crosswalks realigned to the sidewalk corners because many of them are quite set back onto the side streets. Let's see. Oh, we stopped at the kind of gas station slash auto shop on the corner of McGrath, and we're observing a fair amount of dangerous behavior here, with cars pulling into and out of the parking lot and the gas station, including with a prohibited left turn if you're coming from McGrath into the station. We saw that behavior as well, even though there's at least a sign that says it's prohibited. So we were really interested in making that area in particular a lot safer for people walking. And then there was some observation that there was a lot of root-bound trees on the street and they could use some larger tree wells. Then we all had a lot of concerns around the intersection with Medford Street. We saw many drivers just speeding through the stop sign from Pearl Street onto Medford Street, and found that it was kind of a slip lane, even though it wasn't a slip lane. Like the turn from Pearl Street onto Medford Street felt like a slip lane in the way that cars were not stopping. And just speeding onto the street. So we really wanted to see improvements there. And then kind of the last thing that I think was significant is, I mentioned the 80 bus, and we were kind of thinking that, at least a fair amount of attendees were thinking that, it might not be the biggest bang for our buck to invest in like floating bus stops on Western Pearl Street. If there's not going to be a bus running on it in the next 10 years or so, especially given all the trade-offs of this plan. So even though we are a committee that is typically extremely excited about floating bus stops and very supportive of them, we just questioned whether they were really worthwhile in this project, if that space could be used in other ways. So I think I'm just going to editorialize a little bit here, then I'll throw it back to the committee for questions, but just thinking about the kind of flex space that Justin mentioned as being possible in options 2 and 3, it sounds like kind of the only things that we would really be interested in having in those spaces as a committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, are curb extensions, widening the sidewalk, loading zones only for the improvement to safety that brings for, preventing trucks from like parking on the sidewalk, for example. And then also planting zones and tree bump outs were of interest to us as well. The last thing I'll say is that I would really hate to lose the possibility for pedestrianizing Medford Street, especially as a potential additional open space for the high school, just given the needs that those kids have demonstrated, especially over the past year or so. I would really love to leave open that possibility. So I think I personally am leaning in favor of option 3 for those reasons, but I have some questions about the actual implementation of that. But first, want to hear from the rest of the committee. So open it up for questions and comments.
Yeah, for option 2, have you guys decided if you would close it, the traffic going east or going west? Or were you saying like your recommendation is you would have it just go east and not west?
Yeah, so we lean towards that direction of going towards McGrath, just because of the speeding issues we have seen. Because the same issues have been addressed on Medford Street with the new what do you call it? Anyway, it has been addressed, and they have additional lights that make cars stop and think on Walnut and some other intersections before coming into Medford Street. So that it seems to be a better option than the opposite direction. Because then you have now speeding on Medford and speeding on West Pearl as well.
But it's not like, hasn't been decided.
No.
Okay.
Not for the bike or the car, one-way
Okay.
scenario. Has not been decided.
I'm like, how would you as a car get from McGrath into that neighborhood if we closed Pearl?
Generally, Medford is the likeliest.
So you have to
candidate.
essentially do this.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And because we have Walnut,
Yeah,
there could be a little circulation loop if we go,
Yeah.
there's some benefits there, or there's also McGrath to close the loop.
okay,
But TBD on direction,
yeah.
you know.
An interesting point in Walnut is that we don't have an expectation of what kind of bike facilities will be there. Like if people are gonna go up to the community path on Walnut and say on Cross Street on the other side, then I don't think we have good plans for that.
Yeah.
Questions, comments, thoughts? Online folks? Yeah, Bianca.
Hi, yeah, just a quick question, and I'm sorry if I missed this from like previous discussions, but the Medford Street Bridge project, how likely of a possibility is that and the timing of that? And I'm just curious as to, fitting that into the options.
Right, so we completed a 60% design for Medford Street Bridge 2. And there was an engineered concept that connected Pearl and Medford, close the bridge. And then it was paused for two main reasons: is there's no capital funding for that project right now, and then also that empty lot on the site. We're using part of that space for streetscape. We're kind of in the same dilemma on Medford, so using that space allows us to have some parking wider sidewalk. So it's a little tough to answer how likely, but it is on the city's radar. It paused. It would happen, I think, most likely with the redevelopment of the Omen site. And there's also infrastructure work to do underground. So it's a timing issue, and the economic development department, they're doing disposition study to look at all the city-owned parcels, what the city should do with them. The Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, they're pushing very hard because they want to connect their project again. TBD, but it's right now, it's not on the city's capital plan for the next.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Just another question about the options. So, you mentioned that, there could be streets other than Medford Street that would act as the pair. But I guess if it were Medford Street, I mean, maybe this would be helpful, but just as I was kind of looking at a map, I was curious about like what would be the recommended route between Pearl Street and say Medford Street? Like, would be something that they would just kind of take the sidewalk on the grass until it's designed, and then, in the redesign it would be more formalized, or what are your thoughts there?
It's kind of like in phases, because right now MassDOT is adding a protected bike lane, separated bike lane on the grass. It's been delayed because they're working on the bridge that goes track there near Allen. But the idea would be to use the protected bike lane on the grass itself. And then the folks want to do, there's also Walnut Street. And then the long-term redesign, the much upgraded separated path. Yeah, McGrath would provide that direction. But we're looking at other options too, like there may be, we have Walnut, which has partial protected bike lane just for the path connection. And there's the neighborhood itself, Gilman Street. A piece of feedback we've heard in the last 6 weeks is getting to Street with a two-way facility to enable that connection to the neighborway. And I should add, like, that's perfectly acceptable for folks to say, do option 1 here and then do option 3 here. Like we can think outside of these 3 options as well and or whatever it is. But yeah, generally, yeah, basically, sorry, it would be on your question, but yeah.
It's all helpful. Laura, I saw your comment in the chat that we're cutting out again. Is that the same for folks?
Yeah, I'm missing some of the street names that people have been. I might need some help with that later.
Does everyone online just mind muting when they're not talking? Because I think that will help. But apologies. I think the question was, how does Medford Street provide the alternative to Pearl? And I answered basically that McGrath would be used to close that loop, but also that we're still looking at it and there are other options, and that's part of the feedback we want to hear. So I think if we went in that direction, we would also like to publicly vet what's the alternative, basically. We're not just gonna make that decision.
Justin, you mentioned Walnut Street as well, did you not? Okay.
Yes, just it connects Pearl and Medford. It doesn't have a separated bike lane along its full stretch.
Gotcha.
But option 3 proposes to change what's in the bike network plan, so we can look beyond just Pearl Street too for making those changes.
Is anyone a big fan of option 1?
How much parking is on there already? Like, is it both on both sides or is it just on one side?
It's on one side.
Okay,
Before the Green Line extension, it was
Yeah.
on both sides.
okay,
Similar to Cross Street, it's kind of the same width as Cross Street. When the Medford Street Bridge was closed for the Green Line extension, the fire department asked us to restrict parking, asked the city, not us, on mass mobility, on one side for their response, and it wasn't put back after.
I see.
There's a small section from Marshall to Medford that kept parking on both sides, because it gets a
Okay.
little wider there. But generally one side, and we're not proposing to put back the second side, but it's generally one side. It's probably, I don't have a good count in front of me, but it's a couple dozen spaces.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was saying when we did the walk, I think we did a count, and I thought somebody had been keeping a count, but we were pretty well along and we hadn't gotten past 12 or 15 spaces. I'm more concerned about the loading options and drop-offs, especially when you're dealing with the businesses and the the definitely commercial buildings, but also the daycares that they've talked about down there. Right now it's a convenience store and a laundromat, which are both need drop off, but I could also see those, in the future becoming more, restaurants that are doing takeout businesses. And we've seen how much traffic happens with that on Elm Street and in other places where you get restaurant clusters. So that's sort of the flex space that I'm most worried about.
So Christopher, does that put you in the option 3 camp, or what? Are you leaning towards anything?
I think I'm leaning towards option 3, because having a bike path up on the Medford Bridge could still make that bridge be, I feel like, could still be flex space with bikes, where it couldn't be flex space with cars. If that makes sense.
So it sounds like we have some committee enthusiasm for option 1, or sorry, option 2, and some committee enthusiasm for option 3. Are there any committee members who, just for those who haven't expressed an opinion, I would love to know if there are any you're leaning towards at this point? Yeah, Barbara.
I lean toward 3. I don't know how significant it is to not meet the bike network plan.
You wanna speak to that, Justin?
Yeah, there is a city ordinance that we have to implement it.
Oh.
We have to implement the priority network. This is on the priority network. We have the ability to change what the priority network is, so we would have to change, we'd have to go to city council and tell them our plan for making changes, what the alternative route would be. I don't think it would require amending the ordinance, but it would require changing the plan to be consistent with the ordinance.
Well, if that's possible, I like option 3.
Thank you, Barbara.
Just to clarify, we did put all the options out there thinking that they all could be feasible.
Yeah.
So that's why we provided those.
Yeah, they're all possible.
Anyone else? Brenda, Zach, Bianca, not to put you on the spot, I'm just, you have not shared your opinion yet.
Yeah, I'm leaning lightly towards option 3. Keeping the possibility of closing the bridge and having it open space.
Thank you. Yeah, Bianca.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm leaning 3 as well.
So Toko, I know you did not share an option.
Oh, I like
preference.
3. I don't like the one-way vehicle, but that could be because I live on her.
So I'm hearing committee strong leanings towards option 3. Do we want to officialize that with a committee vote and have that be our official endorsement? If not, I think that's fine, and we've clearly given mobility a lot of feedback tonight. But you know, we could formalize it with a vote as well. What do we think?
On 3, would we be able to switch the parking lane to decrease speed?
Yeah,
like switch back and forth?
You mean like, like a chicane, like switching the side? We would, and I imagine we would want to for speeding and also just to put the parking where it's most needed. You know, for example, we showed a picture of Sarma getting a delivery with a truck parked on the sidewalk, like that could be something. Maybe you have it on that side and then there's the other side for other locations. And it's a good traffic calming measure.
Right.
So with 1, we can't really do that at all. With 2 or 3, we could. Yeah, and I guess I'll just add on the floating bus stops that there is more parking when we do floating bus stops, because a regular bus stop needs to be about 100 feet long. Floating bus stop could be more like 40 or 50. Just something to keep in mind is it's using width, but it's width where we couldn't have parking anyway, and it's sort of a more efficient along the street, because it's just shorter.
Is there, so if there are floating bus stops that are put in, like, once the bus goes away, would those be converted into something else?
They could be, yeah. Depaved or blue bike station, bike racks, I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically a bump out. It happens to have a bike lane running behind it.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, there could be an option to reconfigure the bike lane as well, but easiest thing is probably adding some sort of street furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And we truly don't know when the bus will change. The T has not told us, and all we know is it's not in phase 1. Yeah. Yeah. And we don't know 100% how they would react to option 2.
Right.
We'd have to figure out the other direction. With the routing of the 80 bus, it could be pretty challenging to get that bus in and out of East Somerville in both directions. So we don't know exactly how they would respond to that.
Yeah, to me, like, even though we prefer option 2 on our minds, is when the bus goes away. Like the bus is not even there anymore, because how long will it take to implement this?
So we're gonna spend the next year doing design, and then if all goes well, construction either 26 or 27. That'll be the 2-year window. Can't say for sure it'll start in 26, but that would be the goal.
So it's at least like 3 years in the future.
Yeah, could be complete. It's about a year of construction, so it could be completed in 27 or 28. Um,
No. Because it could begin in 2020. Oh, you mean?
Yeah, or
Completed in 26 or 27?
right, the end of 26 or the end of 27.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would give the MBTA time to change the bus route then, sort of give them some advance warning that it was coming.
Yeah, and I think if we were to choose option 2, we would immediately start discussing with them.
Yeah.
It's a tricky route because that bus is basically going to Leechmere via East Somerville. So you can imagine if you're going up Medford or vice versa, how you get back to East Somerville. The bendier you make the bus route, the slower it is. There's trade-offs there.
If we imagine how McGrath is going to be redesigned, do we expect more bikers to use Pearl or Medford? Because Medford connects directly with the community path. With Pearl, it's like, it's weird, it doesn't really work as well.
You mean, do we expect people who are biking on McGrath to use?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not sure. It may depend where they're coming from. Where you can imagine if you're coming from the north, you hit Pearl first, and if you were to use Medford, you're going up a hill just to go back down.
Right.
If you're coming from Boston, Cambridge, you hit Medford first, and that's your convenient route. So it's a little bit. I think it's really dependent. I think we're likely to see more use on both streets when we have a much better bike facility on the McGrath itself.
Yeah, because one of the things we went back and forth on is just like, it's trying to understand the utilization of the bike lane on Pearl. Because if it's just one way, I'm pretty sure bikers are gonna go against the flow, and if there are too many of them, that becomes a problem, right? Like it becomes like a Beacon Street type of thing that is just way too busy for this.
So I do want to make sure that we have time to talk about West Broadway. But for the sake of time, I'm not gonna hold a vote. But I think, we can kind of put on the record that option 3 had the strongest support from the committee with some support for option 2. So thank you all very much for that. On the West Broadway front, so Mobility recently released updated designs, which incorporates community feedback from earlier this year. We did host a community walk on this project. In April, we reviewed the original designs in May, and we released a comment letter on the designs in June, which Mobility just responded to in detail, which was super helpful. Tonight is a pretty short agenda item, just because our design review subcommittee didn't find concerns with the updated designs. But I do just really want to quickly remind folks kind of what our take on the project was. In June with our comment letter, we supported the project's vision to improve conditions for people walking, taking transit, and biking. We were really excited about raised crossings, narrower lanes, bump outs, floating bus stops, basically all the things that were included. We had the following suggestions to ensure that the updated bus stops include benches and shelters and schedules. The updated designs do include new shelters at 4 floating bus stops, which is very exciting. And Mobility is looking into the possibility of schedules. We wanted to add textural and grade separated design features to delineate the space between the sidewalk and the bike lanes and the floating bus stops. And the updated designs include bike lane treatments that alert people walking to the presence of the bike lane and encourage people biking to yield to people walking. We also had a preference for a median refuge island in front of Clarendon Hill Tower, so kind of the crossing closest to Route 16 or Elway Brook Parkway. The updated designs don't include a median refuge island because there was a mixed community response to that idea and because it presented challenges for emergency vehicles and driveway access. The community preference instead was for a curb extension on the north side of West Broadway to perform traffic calming. And then the kind of last specific feedback we had was that we were not so keen on the raised block idea between Endicott and Russell, just because we were skeptical of whether it would actually slow cars down, given the length of the block, whether it would have the same kind of traffic calming effects as a raised crosswalk or a speed hump of some sort. The raised block is included in the updated designs because there was community support beyond our committee for that option. In part because there was a desire to kind of connect these two streets, Endicott and Russell, which are both planned to be future neighborways, and to kind of create a sense of place on the block. Because the updated designs envision, a different surface on the raised block and different treatments to indicate that behavior should be different there. So those are kind of the things that we wanted and how they were handled in the updated design. I am going to pass it to Vitor to summarize the design review subcommittee's take, and then we can have a discussion from the committee.
So yeah, that was very easy for us. We are very happy with the changes. The plan looks great. I think the only concern that we still don't have a good answer for, and we might never have the answer for, is how backed up buses are going to be, because it's just one lane now, and mix up with cars and so on. It might make the experience a little bit worse. But the hope is that the floating bus stops can help at least sustain the positioning line for the bus. But otherwise, the plan looks great. There's no major concerns. I know the city has some questions about where to put benches and blow bikes and those stations. But I think that would be up to you guys to figure out where that can be. We didn't have a preference in any of the positions.
I think the designs are probably too small to really see, but I might as well bring them up. Any committee questions, comments, even if it's just like I like the design, keep going. Any thoughts?
I like the design. Keep going.
Thanks, Christopher.
This was a lot easier than Westboro.
You'd think that.
We're starting.
Well, it does help that it is a road called Broadway, so there's more land to play with, so there aren't as many trade-offs to be made because it's a broader right of way, I imagine, in almost all the cases.
Justin, could you go to the raised block?
Sure. This is on the lower. Actually, do you mind zooming in on your end so it'll be a little clearer?
Yeah, totally.
I still find those two parking spots in the middle of the block a little weird. But it is what it is.
Is that just purely to maximize parking spaces on the corridor?
Yeah, so we got a lot of feedback from businesses. There's kind of on that south side of the raised block. there is a large therapy center that sees a lot of appointments that are between 1 and 3 hours. And then in addition, right on the corner of Farragut Ave, there's a small gym. And so when we were proposing this, there was definitely some concern around parking. We also looked at the ways of that we could create some on-street parking. But it just helps narrow the street a bit more at that location. So that, and you'll see the slight chicane as you're heading eastbound. You can see that slight shift in the yellow line. So we felt that maybe this could work when there is parking. Oh, and again, when we remove all curbside access, we were concerned that would vehicles just block, areas that we don't want them to be.
And I know that this was in the letter that you provided, but you said that there wasn't a ton of data on treatments like this elsewhere, right?
Yeah, we seem to be a fan of Somerville seems to be a fan of trying new things. So we didn't find anything, I think, as we described in the letter, using that kind of the raised block feature in a high volume area that also has bus traffic. So we just weren't able to answer that research question. But maybe we'll be able to create the research for future projects.
And there are bollards, right, along the.
That's correct, yeah.
There's still a curb line, but.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, I'm sorry, the designs disappeared. My computer lost battery. Let me ask the question this way. Does anybody have concerns with the design that they would like to see addressed in the final version? I think you can consider that an endorsement from our committee of the designs.
Thank you very much. We're really excited to get to this stage.
Yeah, thank you for all your great work. Is anybody here to give public comment? Cool. Then I think that is it for our meeting. We are gonna have a meeting in December, December 19th. It is gonna be probably at least in part a reflection on our year and planning for next year. So please start thinking about, what you're hoping to accomplish with PTAC in the next year, what you've enjoyed about this past year, and what you're hoping to see more of. And we'll hopefully have we'll be able to hit the ground running in 2025. But thank you all and have a really, really great rest of your night.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.